talking about something interesting. It's probably not the most popular subject in the world, but maybe the most needed in today's world. It is the process of self-transformation. The process of self-transformation. This is why Richard read the poem this morning about the self and the selves. Within each of us is found an urge, and this urge is called the urge for self-transformation. The urge for self-transformation. This urge starts the moment that we want to do something to move beyond the present moment. Whatever that situation is that you're involved in. Typically, this urge pours into our consciousness when a crisis comes into our life. And that crisis is like a jumping off point that grabs our attention and says, you know, I really want something different for me. I want something different for my life. I want something more significant, more purposeful, that's an interesting word, purposeful, to be happening in my life. I want to have a legacy that will be significant to my family, to my group, to my community, to my nation, to humanity. No matter how big or small it is, I want to do something significant. And like I said, oftentimes this urge for transformation is triggered by a crisis. Other times it's triggered by being inspired by somebody who is doing something significant. And you recognize that you've just been, moving along in your life comfortably, happily, not necessarily joyfully, but you're just doing what you're supposed to do and what you were taught when you were young, that this is how I'm supposed to live my life. But it's become humdrum. And you go to a lecture or you read a book or you go to a concert that's being performed by a master musician, and this urge is triggered. Like, I want to do something different. On the other hand, you do not need to be conscious of this urge. This urge is called the urge toward perfection. The teaching explains to us that we can have 1% of 100% of this urge. 1% of 100% of this urge. Anyone that wants to improve themselves physically, emotionally, and mentally, in his business, in his health, there is going to be this urge available to us. An urge to make us more beautiful, more advanced, more progressed, more spiritually uplifted. This urge eventually comes to the stage where it turns into the urge for self-transformation. Transformation means to change an existing form. That's the first thing. This is a very clear-cut, simple, non-complicated definition. Transformation means to change an existing form or to renew or to regenerate it. There are various forms that will be subjected to transformation. The first form is our physical body. The second and third forms are our emotional and mental bodies. To transform also means three things: to change, to improve, and to regenerate something. To change, to improve, and to regenerate something. Now, if you're on the path, on a spiritual path, these three qualities, to want to change yourself, to improve yourself, to regenerate yourself, must be part of your consciousness. And how can it be? I can just share this little secret with you. And it's very cool. For me, it's very cool because this is how I live my life, is that I see myself as a spark, not as a human being, not as a teacher or a writer or this or that. I just see myself as a spark of a greater being. And that greater being can be, as Valerie was saying in the meditation this morning, it can be for you, it can be Buddha, it can be Christ, it can be Master Moria, Master Katumi, Master Hilarion, so on and so forth. It could just simply be God. But for me, as a human being, as a spark, know I am here to serve that great being. And in that process, I must improve myself. I must change myself. I must transform and regenerate myself every single day, sometimes more than others. That urge becomes increasingly stronger during the full moons of Aries, Taurus, and Gemini. That's the first cycle. The next cycle is around the holy days at the end of the year. We start with the winter solstice and then Christmas and so forth. So when you become more sensitive and more responsive to this urge, that 1% may become 25%, maybe 30, maybe 40, maybe 50% of the 100%. What keeps you humble, what keeps you from falling into the pit of self-interest and vanity and glamour and illusion, is that you still recognize you're a spark that is here to serve the greater one who is in service to humanity. That we are here to help. We as sparks are here to help, to be an instrument of these great ones to push humanity ahead so that we don't continue to repeat history over and over and over and over again, that we're moving into a new frequency, a new resonance, a new level of consciousness as a humanity. And yet we know that we have to have messengers incarnating and reincarnating onto this planet to see that it happens. So oftentimes a master, rather than reincarnating himself into a physical body, he looks for instruments or sparks that are willing to dedicate themselves to their plan. So kind of repeating myself here, so when you think about the process of self-transformation, what's important for me to help you remember is that you're not making these changes and improvements in the regenerational process for yourself, to make yourself a megalomaniac, or all those things that are categorized in the dark side of life. You know, we're headed toward light, increasing light, greater light, love, and power on the path of evolution for humanity. So, again, when you're thinking about, you know, today's lecture and the process of self-transformation, look at yourself not as, Annie Smith that grew up in Iowa, that had a dad for a this and a mom for a that. Don't compartmentalize yourself in such a way that you cut yourself off from the purpose that you're here. See, am I making sense? Okay. So, for those of us that see ourselves as a spark that can be an instrument for a great one, then we want to every day be conscious, to be cognizant of the need to change ourselves, to improve ourselves, to regenerate the self, which is part of the all self, so that we can become better instruments of service for the Great One. There is a type, no, so I'm moving on now, but I just had to say that, okay? For various reasons. Anyway, there is a type of archetypal programming in every single soul that causes a person to strive toward that unknown programming, which is not really revealed in their consciousness, but it is there. Now, what I just gave to you and what I'm going to be talking about now, what I just gave to you is a teaching for the new disciple. What I'm going to be talking about now is a much slower path. It's more for the person who is functioning at a 1% urge, but wants still to change themselves, improve themselves, and to regenerate something in themselves they don't know what the heck that is, that they need to have regenerated, but it's there. So the point is that every soul has this urge, whether it's 1% or 100%. And that urge comes from the, what I call the archetypal programming that is found in each and every soul. All of our improvements and transformations are responses to this programming. But know this, whether you see yourself as a spark serving a great one, or you are just still in that category of the 1%, know this, that transformation is not easy. It is not an easy path. It is a very difficult process. For centuries, we have built our bodies in certain patterns, certain habits of our physical body. Okay, so certain habits of our physical bodies, certain manifestations of our emotional and mental natures, they've become crystallized to such a degree that when we decide we're going to change them, we meet with tremendous opposition. You can sometimes see these things, these oppositions, in your astrological chart. If you have an esoteric knowledge of your horoscope, I'm not talking about the typical form, what we call the exoteric form of your chart, but your sidereal chart to start with, and then other things. For example, you say, do these things, I do these things in this manner because I am a Gemini. But in reality, you learn sidereally you are not a Gemini but a Taurus. And that has to do with the sidereal time you were born, exact star time. But let's say you truly are a Gemini, esoterically, you are going to learn that you are no longer ruled by the exoteric ruler Mercury, but by Venus. Very different ray 4 to ray 5. Very different energy. It is so beautiful. And then you begin to study esoteric astrology, and you learn how these transformational urges reflect the urging of your unfolding soul, the esoteric nature of your horoscope. So these urges to change can sometimes be embarrassing. You want to do something, but you cannot do it. You want to be really, really spiritual, but you become just the opposite of that. You want to complete something perfectly, but you mess it up, or you create chaos or disorder. You do this because the forms that you have built throughout the centuries attack the force of change within you. You know the saying some people repeat is a phrase, I am who I am. I am who I am. Don't try to change me. I just heard last week somebody say, I won't allow anybody to ever tell me what to do. Well, they're building that archaic form that prevents the freedom to change, the challenge to transform themselves. They just love being who they are and where they are, and by God, they're not going to move out of Iowa for all the tea in China. You do these things because the forms that you built throughout centuries attack the force, that urge, those forces of change, those urges of change within you. Our personality life plays certain games. Let's say that a person is imitating that they are really, really good. And they're imitating self-transformation. This is the worst thing that a person can do because it builds another layer of hypocrisy in their character. The second and third and fourth layers are more and more difficult to crush and destroy or to cut through than the first. Transformation is a very difficult process, but once you feel this inner urge, you are going to make it. You are going to transform your life. This is what that urge is all about. From that moment forward, you will take steps very scientifically and professionally to fight against your former self-image. The thing is that at the present time, we have forms that are not ideal. Not ideal to the times of 200, 300, 400, 500 years from now. They're not the ideal forms. For example, our body is not only not the ideal now, it is definitely not going to be the ideal for 500 to 1,000 years from now. I realized that when I was in Mongolia trying to climb a mountain. My body is not the most ideal. When I think of going back to India, to Darjeeling in the Himalayan mountains and climbing 27,000 feet to get to the top of Mount Everest, I realize that my physical body is not the ideal to do that. We are fat, we are thin, we are not perfectly proportioned. Our body is slightly deformed and not really stable and healthy. The older you get, the more you're going to realize these things. Your emotional body is not ideal because most folks do not yet have a developed emotional or astral body. And most people's mental body is still in a very early developing stage. People think that if they know a few things in scientific, political, or historical terms, now they are cultivated and they have a mature mental body. But this is not the case. Today, millions of tapes are available to put into the computer of our mind and to help us pretend that we are something. And this is called, of course, self-deception. Ideal bodies have 7 characteristics. So if you want to build the ideal physical, emotional, mental, and higher bodies, and if they are in the ideal progressing stage of development, because there's always going to be development, you're going to demonstrate 7 characteristics. Now, these are all from the teaching. The first is beauty. First, you become beautiful mentally, then emotionally, and physically. Inner beauty manifests slowly and makes you very attractive, handsome, or lovely in manifestation. Your words and motives are really beautiful. Beauty here means great harmony and goal fitness. Goal fitness is a term in Agni Yoga that asks for study and meditation and contemplation to really think, what does it mean to live a life of goal fittingness? It's very interesting. 2, health is the second characteristic. You not only look healthy, but you are healthy. You are healthy physically, emotionally, and mentally. Sometimes you manifest different stages of development. Physically, let's say you're 45 years old. Emotionally, you are still a baby. And mentally, you are an untamed person. Now, in the teaching, the word they used was savage, that mentally you are savage. I really had a tough time with that word. I understood it. It took me a long time to understand it because it did. So I used, I chose my own word, which is untamed. So it opens the door to further thought. So I'm going to keep that word. So mentally, we are an untamed person. But perhaps people see your 45-year-old body and they say, this is a man, this is a woman. But they do not know really you are still a child, a young child, an untamed person dwelling in you. Untamed mind, right? Thoughts, and so forth. Nor that you are identified with these images. You can easily see this in yourself and others. For example, this person is a professor, but emotionally, they are a baby. And mentally, they are square. You can also see people in your environment whose 3 bodies are harmoniously developed. This is what health is. I remember there is a fellow in the teaching that is a scientist and is highly knowledgeable about physics. Well, I've always been interested in physics ever since high school. And here I found this fellow on the path. I want to study with this guy. I want to learn Agni Yoga from the scientific point of view because there's so much science in Agni Yoga. I wasn't around this person more than 2 months, and I realized he had an emotional body the size of a pea. I'm sorry, but that's just, my recognition that no, those 3 bodies are not fully developed yet. So where I could have stayed with him and learned from him the science that I was seeking, I would have been so distracted by that little astral body, it would have thrown me off balance. A healthy person is one who has the same age in their three bodies. There are an immeasurable number of mentally retarded people in the world, but the urge for transformation is still there. And all people on their own level are striving to be something and somebody. In this way, they will eventually meet that ideal archetype that is projected into their capital S self. Number 3, increasing sensitivity is a third characteristic. When your three bodies and the emotions and thoughts are healthy and developing and are in the process of transformation, you see that their bodies are becoming physically, emotionally, and mentally very sensitive. Sometimes this sensitivity cycle drives you crazy because you register everything that is occurring around you physically, emotionally, mentally. How can you balance yourself when this happens? Stability. Stability is to go through these storms without losing your foothold. That's the challenge. Number 4, the registration of developing senses. We say that we can see through our eyes, but an advanced artist is not seeing as we see. An artist's eyes are totally different from most people's. If an artist's eyes are 80% progressed, he or she is a genius. Some people do not hear certain things. They do not even discriminate in what they are hearing. Their ears are not developed. Their other physical senses are also not developed. There are also emotional and mental senses. How can we see that these emotional and mental senses are developing? One way is toward transformation. Our physical, emotional, mental, and higher senses are unfolding, starting to unfold and developing and making us a central point of registration and control. The more information we have from the outer and inner worlds, the more control we have upon our mechanism. The greater control we have on our mechanism, the better we can use the information that we are receiving from the outer and inner worlds. An average person sees the ocean, a tree, or a flower and says, wow, that's beautiful. But a person who has developed their senses sees cosmic beauty and translates it into a work of art. Number 5, tuning in with the higher bodies is the 5th characteristic. Transformation brings our physical body to a stage of development in which it slowly tunes in with the astral body. This is the process of integration, right? Then the astral body tunes in with the mental body. These 3 bodies coordinate and integrate each other into the process of transformation. The transformation. Not only with our physical body, but also with our emotions and our mind and with our spirit, we're going to become shining beauties in the world. That is the goal. Number 6, tuning in with the higher centers. As transformation proceeds within us, our aura starts to receive higher and higher sources of information. One day a great teacher was asked, "How can you know so many things and answer any questions asked of you?" He replied, "I tune in with the centers that are the authorities of this subject." Evolving and developing senses eventually brings us into contact with higher centers of creativity, of information, and knowledge. Now I'm going to go back to the beginning just for a second. Using these words, we come into contact with higher centers of creativity, information, and knowledge. This is what the new disciple wants to do. This is why, as a new disciple, you must recognize you are but a spark of a great one, and you have pledged yourself and dedicated yourself to serve that great one who serves an even greater one for humanity. So it's not about you, it's about you being an organism of service. So as that new disciple, or the disciple of the new age, comes into incarnation, they want more creativity, more information, more knowledge to be of greater service, not to inflate their ego and sense of self-importance. There is another goal. This is another goal toward which we are striving. We are not going to be like we were in our past lifetimes. Don't sit down with somebody and say, "Do you know who I was?" You know, it's a trap. It is a trap, and it oftentimes keeps a person stuck there. And the rest of their life, is lost. So we are not going to be like we were in our last several lives, sleeping and imitating. We are going to graduate and eventually become superhuman. This is the process that we must have in our consciousness. We must observe where we are, what kinds of breakthroughs and conflicts we need, so that we can eventually destroy layers and layers of hindrances that we have accumulated around ourselves. All of us are involved in this transformational process. See, from 1% to 100%. 7, the creative process. When the physical, emotional, mental bodies are healthy and the person has lofty thoughts, something wonderful appears. People become creative. Now let me give you a little example. When I started driving over here this morning, I could barely see. I had something in my right eye, and it was getting worse and worse and worse. I came into the center here, and I started feeling a little bit better, but I knew I wasn't going to be able to read my notes or not be distracted. And so I just sat there for about 3 minutes and asked for a healing for my eye. And my eye was healed. That is a creative process. I could have sat there and said, "I can't do this. I'm not going to do this. We're going to cancel this Sunday morning. I'm in too much pain. I. But we have such a treasure to pull from. So when we're in this process of transformation, and we as a spark are serving something greater than ourselves, all we have to do is ask. That's a creative process. We become creative in ideas, in emotions, in projects. which have a regenerative influence upon others. If you sincerely want to transform yourself, you are going to pay the price for it. Okay, I'm going to take just a minute here. Something I wanted to share from the teaching that I'm just thrilled with. Okay, here we go. I'm jumping through a whole bunch of stuff here. Good stuff, but stuff. Okay. The ancients thought that the best teacher was the most difficult teacher. I agree. I had some really, really tough teachers in my life that helped to shape me, including my parents. But then I had this incredibly difficult teacher. He could have been soft and soft and soft to anybody that fell in love with him as a teacher. But that teacher recognized, here's a spark that has dedicated herself to a great one, so I'm going to make her life hell. Okay, I know I'm being very revealing here, but the difficulty that that teacher put me into, I'm still learning from today, which is amazing. Such a teacher makes you misery, makes your misery, hate, and revenge come out so that eventually your misery, your hate, and your revenge come out so that eventually you come to a moment when you are ready to break your shells, your limitations. But if your ego is like steel, you will run away or you will think you are superior to your teacher. The real teacher makes you uncomfortable. Whenever you find that a teacher is making you uncomfortable, that is the first sign that they are a teacher. The first thing the teacher wants you to do is to face your own stupidities. The teacher can make you angry. They make you uncomfortable, and you do not know what to do. If you turn this way, you are wrong. If you turn that way, you are wrong. The teacher is slowly focusing your mind until you see exactly what you are without deceiving yourself. This is a true teacher. The teacher is a great help in the transformational process until your capital S self takes over. There are many steps of transformation. For example, one, and these are 6 points, short points. Confrontation is the first step. Never try to hide from yourself or from your teacher. 2, never justify yourself. Christ never justified himself even when he was in court. He never justified himself. Never justify yourself. Don't say, I am who I am because I'm from Iowa. See, don't justify yourself. 3, go to your teacher and ask for the discipline you need, but not necessarily the discipline that you expect. The discipline you need is the one you least expect. You must go to your teacher and ask, what discipline do you need? He may say, quote, unquote, obey my suggestions, even if they do not please you. Otherwise, stop being his student. If you stop seeing him and start slandering and cursing and gossiping about him, you are burying yourself. But if you can face what he says and ask yourself, what is the plan behind his action? And you may not have an answer for years, because it's still in the process. What is the plan behind his actions? Then you are on the right path of transformation. Number 4, never use treason against your higher self and your teacher. Never. The greatest sin is acting against your teacher. The teacher can be a teacher on any level, because there is only one stream of light. 5, always develop harmlessness and gratitude within your soul. These 2 protective agents will protect you from falling into slander and malice and treason. And number 6, be a fearless fighter to increase light, and do not obey anyone unless your conscience tells you to do so. The teacher acts as the representative of your higher self, and then yourself, until yourself awakens to such a degree that you can take over. And what that means, for those of you that don't know the nomenclature, is the teacher acts as representatives of our solar angel. And then once that solar angel leaves, then represents our capital S self. You can say to the teacher, I can do it now. And the teacher looks at you, and if you are real, when you say, I can do it now, will say, do it for yourself now. So that's enough. So I've left out a few pages, but I think you got the most significant